Sabaidi, Tuktukun, hello everyone. It is such an honor and such a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm from Boise, Idaho, but originally I'm from Baksay, Laos. So Baksay is in the southern part of Laos, and you can say I'm a Southern Belle, and I even speak with a thick Southeast Asian Lao accent. So when I speak my mother tongue with other Lao people from the north, there's a pause, a concerning pause on their face. They hesitate, and then they look at me and they say, "Oh, that's right, you're from the South, aren't you, the deep South?" So, like many parts around the world, Southern accents are very peculiar and very unique to that particular region. I typically like to walk around, but I don't think I can hold this thing and walk around much, but I want to start off by offering, and can you guys all hear this echoing noise behind me? Okay, maybe it's just me. I want to start off with thoughts of appreciation, with thoughts of gratitude, and just in the spirit of what Richard had offered. I want to thank a few folks, first and foremost, Richard, for bringing me here to, let me get this pronunciation right, Mobile, Alabama. Did I say that right? Oh gosh, thank you. I think automobile, so Mobile, Alabama. Just a warm gratitude from my heart to him in our dialogue that we had that really ignited this unification of hearts and minds and bringing us together. I mean, I'm looking across a sea of blurriness because my eyesight is not as good anymore, so I have an appointment to go see my LASIK surgeon. So if you're smiling and you're raising your hand and I'm looking straight at you, know that I'm just looking at a blob. And so you'll want to stand up and maybe wiggle around a little bit. The next person that I'd like to offer a thought of appreciation to is Bethany Hawkins. Bethany, where are you? I can't see. Bethany, there she is. Please give Bethany a round of applause. I have been in active communication with Bethany, and she is the one that is the glue that binds all of this together. I know what she is going through because after this, I'm going to be hopping on a plane to Ireland to kick off my company's second annual global conference in Galway, Ireland. So I know the expansive number of logistics that she is involved in leading is just immense. And so please give her grace. Please give her your thoughts into actual words of appreciation. And then I wonder if Noelle Harris is in the room. Noelle, are you here? There she is, Noelle. She was my seatmate on our Delta flight from Atlanta to Mobile, and I want to say thank you so much for sharing a piece of her journey, a piece of her life, and this is what we're all about, right? And in the spirit of what Richard had talked about, the past, the present, and the future, we are living in the current. We're living in the present, but we're always reflecting on what was, what happened in the past. But then how do we transform our mind in walking that forward into the future? So what I'm talking about is how do we inspire the next generation of historians? How do we inspire the next generation of museum practitioners to carry our heart into the future in a way that speaks their language? And I'm not talking about race or ethnic cultures, but I'm talking about the generational differences in culture. And my platform is all about that. So here on the first screen, you'll see my title, Learn, Discover, and Explore. Learn about the raw realities of history, unedited. Learn about the people's struggles. Learn about how things came to be without the narratives of others, right? That's history. Discover, that's today. Discover how we are connected to the world today, to your community today, right? And then exploring what could be in the future, exploring and understanding your role. How can you ignite an impact through your lens the next generation of historians? We're going to talk about reconnecting and igniting history, and we're going to do it all through storytelling. So there's a science behind it. So here's my disclosure. I won't read it, but there you have it. So here's a snapshot of me. And it's always interesting when people are speaking and they have their pictures up on the screen, because I'm up here, right? So look at me. But it's rare that you see history unfold. That is a picture of me in the refugee camp. I was 4 years old. This was 1979. Looks like I was in a concentration camp. So, and I'll share with you my story in due course, but that is the plaque that defined who I am. That was the spelling of my name given to me, right? My mother didn't spell that name because we write our languages in Sanskrit, and it's completely different. So there was a Frenchman who heard my name, my last name, and he wrote it out, and that is my permanent name. And that number there, 3/3, is because I'm the youngest out of the 3 in my party, my mother, and then my older brother, and that was the number that they gave to us to identify who we are as we lived in the refugee camp for about 2 years. And Richard did a great job in outlining who I am and what I am, and so this just paints the pictures. I wear many, many hats, and one of them I'm here to present in front of you from a museum practitioner or a musopreneur. Many of you are musopreneurs. So this is an overview. This is a unique overview in that I am going to touch on the past, the current, the future. So the whole theme of my presentation is going to be cyclical, right? So the past, the current, the future, the past, the current, the future, because when we reach the future, it becomes the past, and we repeat the cycle over and over again. So stay with me. When we learn, reflecting on the past, we're going to be talking, and I'm going to be sharing with you stories of the past that inspire us to learn about the human journey, about the lived experience of those who endured it. Discovering the current, discovering where we're at today. How are we living? How are we contributing to society? We're going to talk about how do we create opportunities today in the present to enhance how we discover ourselves and how we're connected to history. And then as we transition into the future, we're going to take a deep dive into the changing landscape all around us to explore the role of historians, all of you, in shaping the future for the next generation. So, learning objectives. I know this probably sounds like overkill. So that is actually me climbing a mountain, and I just did it just for the picture, and then I turned around and went back. So I didn't get all the way to the top, but lesson learned, right? When you're out of breath and you can't do it, you gotta realize and have courage to say, nope, I'm not gonna climb that extra 1 foot. So what we're gonna do today, I'm hoping that out of my presentation, you'll learn about the science of storytelling, that you'll be able to apply it in practice. You'll be able to understand the art of storytelling and how it can transform your approach to doing history, which is all about our theme today. And then lastly, we're going to integrate that, the storytelling piece and the history, to foster and connect meaningful relationships and hopefully impact positive outcomes, whether that be in your organization, whether that be in relationships, or whether that be in your community or those that you're mentoring or coaching. So before we get started, I'm going to kick us off by taking your temperature and inviting you to take your own temperature. This is a different kind of temperature, right? So we had the COVID, and we had a lot of changes around us influenced by the COVID or informed by the COVID, and change is all around. Change is part of everyday life. Some people can handle change well, some people can't. Some people require change to happen over a period of 20 years versus 2 hours. So how do we check our temp? This is something that you can do as you're entering into a meeting and you're gauging, physical body reaction, people folding their arms, and not because it was cold, because of the air is blowing behind me and I'm kind of cold up here. But you're reading the room, you're gauging the temperature in the room, and what I'm talking about is all of these elements, right? So temp, our thoughts, our emotions, our level of energy, our mood, and our perspectives. So whatever it is that we're thinking, it is going to impact our level of energy. Are we able to give fully as we're engaging or trying to contribute in that meeting, in that moment? What does our emotion say as we're thinking and processing those thoughts, right? All of that is connected. And as a result of that, it's going to impact our mood. Are we going to be able to contribute in a way that is productive, or are contributions going to be curt or silence? And as a result of all of that energy in our head and our heart, it's going to impact our perspectives. So, Our thoughts impact our behaviors, and as a result, impacts the desired or undesired results. So keep that in mind when you go into a meeting. Check your temp. Check your thoughts, your energy level, your emotions. How does that transpire into your mood, and how might that impact your perspectives? So my platform is all about storytelling because we're humans, and to be human is to be imperfect, but we also want to connect. So the forces of Mother Nature could not keep me away from being here with all of you. And to be human is to be imperfect. So if my hair is stringy right now and it's all over the place, it is okay, because I want you to know that is my natural state. I walked across the what is it called? The walkathon? Not the walkathon, but that, I'm from Idaho. What is that thing? The canopy? The sky bridge. Yeah, the sky bridge, yes. And the wind was blowing, and my hair was ratty and all over the place. But, again, the forces of nature can't keep me away. Here I'm going to read off a quote from Smith, who's the director of the International Storytelling Center. We, all of you, are all storytellers. We all live in a network of stories. So true. Right? There isn't a stronger connection between people than storytelling. The journey of self-discovery, the journey of us to learn, to discover, and to explore how we are actively part of history and how we carry that within ourselves and share that for the benefit of the future is what this is all about, what stories do to help us connect to one another. So here I am in Laos. This was why I missed your AASLH meeting in Boise, Idaho last year, because I was in Laos with National Geographic Explorer. So I'm to the left, and to the right is Professor John Cox. And we are in part of Laos where it's mountainous terrains, and I was telling him where my family embarked, where we walked up and down the mountains, through and meandering through the woods and the jungles, and hid in massacre sites and grave sites, climbed up trees to sleep in for safety. That was my story that I shared with John Cox. Sometimes reality is too complex. It really is, that we have to share our stories to give it life, to breathe life into historical stories and bring it back tenfold today. And through that journey of telling and sharing your stories, you're inspiring the next generation, or perhaps the next person, to revitalize that story, and on and on and on. So our journey begins. Learn, right? Learn the raw realities of the stories. So these are stories of the past. What you see on the screen here is a picture. The big picture is of my beautiful mom, Palina Louangketh. Palina is her name. It was not her birth name. That was a name that she made up for security, for safety. Her name is Jantai. She never uses that name, but when we had to do paperwork to escape the communists, so the communists invaded Laos in 1975, my father was scheduled, he was a captain in the Royal Military, he was scheduled for a public execution when the communists invaded. Many officers, many professors, many students were scheduled for public execution. My father was one of them. Luckily, my mother's family helped to arrange his escape. So off he went with the promise of returning to help my mother, who was pregnant with me at the time, and my brother escape once he went over to Thailand, the land of the free, and to come back, to re-enter the country and help us escape. But that never happened, because as he went into Thailand, into the refugee camp, he found another woman and sent my mother a letter that said, I found another woman, I have another family now. If you can, get an abortion, good luck. And off he went. That is another story I'll tell for another day. But today I'm focusing on the courageous decision of one woman who was betrayed by her husband, a woman who cared so deeply about her children, and she made that decision one night. That night in November, we left in the middle of the night. We had dinner with my grandmother and with her aunts. Everybody knew that was the night, but nobody spoke a word because there were spies everywhere, everywhere. If you got a knock on the door at night, you were not to open the door. And if somebody came into your house, you had permission to kill that person for safety, for safety. So we had dinner with my family, and that was it. They never saw us for 11 years. They actually held a funeral service for us. Can you believe that? Give me a moment, please. Van Zandt, who's an author and a lawyer, says, when you stand and share your story in an empowering way, your story will heal you, and your story will heal somebody else. We met up with 3 escape guides who were hiding in the woods. Mom had somewhat arranged this like 2 weeks in advance. These were 3 men with knives and with guns, 3 men fully capable of doing harm. Mom had seen and had heard of horrific situations that have befallen families. Women and children raped, men beaten, children, women sold into slavery, into prostitution as they were trying to flee, entrusting their lives with escape guides. And there were escape guides everywhere throughout Laos. Now, if you were a bad person and you decided to make a quick and easy money, you'd probably become an escape guide. And if you're going to take a 2-week to 2-month journey out of Laos and you're with strangers, why would you care about them? You would take them halfway and you would kill them, take their money, and go back for more people. We lived along the Mekong River, and when the communists invaded, when they took over Laos, it wasn't long until bodies started floating down the river, day after day. The river was undrinkable, as you can imagine. It just reeked of decaying corpse. So everything shut down. Everything shut down. We journeyed on foot through the jungles. Like I said, we actually climbed up trees, rosewood trees, huge trees, and we slept up in those trees for 10, 15 minutes in the daytime, and we journeyed some more. For the most part, Asians are very superstitious, and so sleeping next to a dead body or a massacre site or grave site is unheard of. But we were so scared that we did. That smell of dead bodies and the glare of a dead person looking at you haunts me today. Haunts me today. We got to the river of the Mekong River at the bank on the Laos side. So east of the Mekong River is Laos. West is Thailand, the land of the free. Above Laos is China, which is communist. To the east of Laos is Vietnam, so you've heard of the Vietnam War. Well, the Vietnam people in Vietnam don't know what the Vietnam War is. They call it the American War. And we're going to talk about elevating our levels of cultural intelligence at a later point in my presentation. And then to the south of us, Cambodia, which was experiencing mass genocide. So nowhere was safe but Thailand. But as you know, what happens to people, to families, when they enter a country illegally? We have heard many accounts south of the United States. It's no different anywhere else in the world. We got to the bank of the Mekong River, and the guides had a single-file wooden rowboat hidden in the bushes, and we all got in. It was the 3 guides, my family of 3, and 2 young strangers, a young woman and a young man. My mother was afraid that they would rape the young woman, so she claimed the young woman as her niece and made up a story that the young woman was a newlywed to the young man. I will tell you, that was 79. Today, they are still married, have kids and grandkids. Is that special or what? So as we started rowing the boat, of course, this is the Mekong River. It's like the mighty Mississippi, heavily patrolled by the armed forces of Thailand, by the communist Laos. We rowed in the middle of the night, and as the river was drifting us south, halfway through, the guides stopped rowing. Why? Why would you think that they would stop rowing? Well, as we saw earlier, bodies floating down the river. There were families of 5 to 10 with ropes tied to their waist, just floating down the river, dead. And it's because the escape guides tipped over the boat. Remember when I said, why would they want to take you all the way and risk their own lives when they can take you halfway? So that was what had happened many, many times. Mom knew immediately that was probably what was going to happen to us, and we would probably all die. Because what happens when a parent sees a child goes under? That parent is going to go after that child. What happens to the other parent when the other parent sees that? The other parent will go after that parent and that child. And what happens to the teenage children who see that? They're going to go after the parents. And all of a sudden, you have a whole family that has just drowned out of love. So, one of the guides turned to my mom. What I didn't tell you is that my mother claimed that she had 2 sons, my brother and me. She was afraid that they would know that I'm a female, a little girl, and that they would keep me and sell me for prostitution and slavery when I got older, for slavery as a young child, and as I got older, prostitution. So she said that I was her baby son. The things that parents do to protect their child. So lying in that case is perfectly okay. One of the guides turned around and said, your youngest son was a burden to us. We had to carry him up the tree. He coughed a lot because I'm asthmatic. Do you have any more money? Who carries paper money in a state of war like that? Money doesn't matter, right? So everybody had gold. She remembered that my grandmother had sewn gold jewelry on the inside of our clothes because we didn't have pockets, so if we shook them, there would be no sound. So she flipped over my brother's pant leg, and there was a gold ring, gave it to them, and they continued rowing. And there's a whole story behind all of that that I won't share today, but it's a very spiritual story, that something happened in that wake. Something happened. You can call it a miracle. You could call it, if you're someone of religious faith, God beaming down to protect you. But something happened that scared the escape guides. And we journeyed on to Thailand. They said, you're safe. Sleep here and somebody will come get you in the morning. Mom said that was the best sleep she's had in 2 weeks since we left on foot. And when we woke up, she realized that we were sleeping on fresh grave mounds. When the body is buried in shallow graves in a hot, humid climate, the gases will push up the dirt. So she felt and believed that the spirits of those who had passed were protecting us. Then a man comes crawling through one of the burrows and says, you've broken the law of my country. They're after you. You need to come with me. I mean, holy tater tots. I'm from Idaho, so we have to say things like that. Holy tater tots, right? If I was in Nebraska, we'd say holy cow. Holy tater tots. He could have been a serial killer, a rapist, who knows? So we piled in his truck and he took us to his house where his wife was cooking dinner for us. He said, rest and we'll leave in the morning. 15 minutes into resting, he comes barging into the room and says, they know you're here, we gotta go. So he piled us back into the car, the truck, and put rice bags around us, and we drove for hours. We came to a stop, and Mom is telling me this story. We came to a stop, and all of a sudden we were dodging left and right, sticks, knives, and swords that were coming through. It was the Thai officers, the Thai military folks, checking to see if anybody was hiding. Mom is laughing hysterically, because she thought it was so funny. She was living in the current and reflecting on the past. And in this quote, right, I was living in the past, hearing her story, trying my best to hold it in while she's laughing because she has healed herself from sharing her story. I'll fast forward to the current here soon. So we ended up in the Thailand refugee camp. We announced our arrival, stamp of approval, November 1979. It took us 2 years until October 1981 before we arrived in Tater Tot Land, Boise, Idaho. October of 1981. So the picture, the colored picture, is of us. And that house in the background is a double garage that the Presbyterian Church pulled together their money and helped us to live independently in this double garage that was converted into 1-bedroom little house in the alley. Cherished memories. And look at the difference between my mom as a younger woman smiling and my mom in the refugee camp and her in the current, even though we're reflecting on the past. Very different. So history, sharing our history, helps us to heal, gives us inspiration, gives us hope. Ooh, I did something. There we go. Thank you. Oops. Okay, I went too fast. There we go. So now let's talk about stories of current. So as you know, I'm the founder, executive director, and CEO of the Idaho Museum of International Diaspora, or IMID. That was inspired by my family's journey. I had an epiphany one night, an epiphany in the middle of the night, 12:35 a.m. The forces were so strong that I had to pull out my laptop, and I wrote down a bunch of gobbledygook, polished it up within 2 weeks, wrote a 6-page white paper, and it was a framework for an innovative museum called the Idaho Museum of International Diaspora. Did a couple of presentations, and it took off internationally. This young lady here in the picture is a journalist. Her city in Ukraine was the first that was attacked, that was bombed by the Russians. She is now a member of the IMID's Global Leaders Fellowship program. And I am meeting up with her in Ireland next week with our friends from National Geographic, University of Delaware, and Dickinson College to continue building the film documentary about Ukrainians historically who came over in the 90s and currently who are affected by the current war, and their stories of hope in returning back to Ukraine. The strongest people are not those who show strength in front of us, but those who win battles we know nothing about. So when you hear stories, think about their lived experience. Think about the trials and tribulations that they've endured. Stories of the current is how we exist today. How do you exist today if not through understanding the world around you, the stories that have impacted you, good or bad? It is the here and now, because we're here together. And how do we navigate the future of uncertainty together, if not learning from some of those stories, learning from those trials and tribulations to help us navigate and chart a more healthier course forward. So you don't have to look at the slide for this, because I want to read this off to you. And I want you to ground yourself in where is your head, where is your heart. So are you in a job as historians, or is this your calling? Is this your noble purpose? This is from an American author, Izo. One of the key ways to staying in love with our work is to continue to see the wonder available to us at work, to always see the noble possibilities in our role. I am with a Congolese refugee in this picture, and although the artisans, the organizers, the nonprofit was showing me that this is their skill set, their talent, she was actually telling me about her culture, her history, right? So it wasn't just a job. It was part of her life. Are you a manager who sees your job as making the payroll, while another sees herself as mentoring young people? A gardener sees his job as pulling weeds, yet another thinks about the smile people will have when they pass by and see only beautiful flowers. Lastly, a receptionist sees her job as answering the phone, while another believes she can brighten the lives of people with her voice. Think about that. Where are you? Who are you? And how are you doing history? How are you practicing history, to our theme of this conference? Here I am with His Excellency Ambassador Radovan, who is the Slovak ambassador to the United States. I am there at the Slovak Republic Embassy in Washington, D.C., and we are sharing our history all around potatoes. I'm not sharing my Lao history, but my Idaho refugee journey surrounded by potatoes. And because he is Slovak, it is all about potatoes. So we did a cooking demonstration for a group of VIP dignitaries who came in, and this was to promote the launch of our inaugural global conference in Banska Bystrica, Slovakia last year. So in the context of being historians, think about this. A historian sees his job as educating others about the correct timeline of events, while another inspires the next generation of historians with layers of captivating stories that move one's soul to experience history. Which are you? A manager at a museum sees her job as making sure operations don't fall through the cracks. Another fosters a culture of joy in the work environment by creating opportunities for all employees to learn and serve as history practitioners. Which are you? A file clerk sees his job as filing historical archives accurately for others to easily find them, while another realizes the special role entrusted in him to take inventory of the rich history, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the spaghetti Western, experienced by so many across time. And lastly, a seasoned historian sees her role as a coach to train new historians the trade, while another holds sacred what once was by sharing her journey of learning, discovering, and exploring history as it was told over time by many historians and storytellers, as it was lived by those who endured the moment, and as it was remembered by those directly and indirectly involved. So what I just did there with the 3 bullets was reflecting on the past, learning, the current, discovering, and the future, exploring. Stories of the future. Yeah. Do you all know Fred Flintstone? Not really, but Fred Flintstone and the Jetsons. Yeah, I grew up on this, and I absolutely love it. So there's always room for a story that can transport people to another place. This is a well-known author, Rowling. So when the past meets the future, how do we translate that in the current? So, the Jetsons. This was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon in the 1960s. Nobody knew what the future would look like. But how is it that they could envision? What do you see to your left, right? What is that? Is that Zoom, WebEx, right? Yeah. If you're thinking of something else, like a giant in the room, then that's completely wrong. The second one, what is that? If not telemedicine, right? The third one, FaceTiming. And the fourth one is your Apple iPhone. From the 60s, they envisioned this, and it all came true. Not that it was intended, but it was inspired. Storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world today. Those were stories that captivated perhaps maybe the minds of someone like Elon Musk. I don't know. So here is the science of storytelling. Right? It's never random, it's never a coincidence, or it can be. And then there's a pattern to it, a pattern of 3. The past, the current, the future. Learn, discover, explore. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every story has a background, a past. And as you're telling it today, you're integrating current narratives. And then where do you go? What does the end look like? So that is the science of the storytelling. Here are some glimpses. I had mentioned the good, the bad, the ugly. So propaganda in Laos, when the communists took over Laos, they showed Clint Eastwood spaghetti western. Have you all seen Clint Eastwood spaghetti western? Yeah. So the United States is uncivilized. There's no technology. Everybody's still riding around in a horse and shooting each other, the Wild West. Who would ever want to go to the United States? Until people were smuggling pictures in from the United States of refugees who have left and living the life, right? When we were in the US and my mom was able to afford a Pinto, she worked 3 jobs. She wanted to be American so bad that she bought a white Pinto with a huge American flag painted on its hood. It was fantastic. We were Americans on our way to live the good life. So back to the slide. 3 emphases, right? The history, the healing, the hope. 3 wishes. Everything is centered on the science of 3 because it helps us to remember. How many of you have heard about the Choluteca Bridge, if I'm pronouncing that correctly? Has anybody heard about the Choluteca Bridge in Honduras? Wow, and you're historians. So now you're hearing it, and now you'll share this story. Well, this bridge was was a replica of the Golden Gate Bridge, of the Brooklyn Bridge as well. It was an engineering marvel. The government of Honduras brought in Japanese engineers to build this grandiose design that would withstand the forces of Mother Nature. Built in the late 1990s, almost 500-meter long. I don't know what that is in foot, but looking at the picture, I think you can easily run across without crashing. So take a good look at Honduras and the Choluteca Bridge. Have you heard about the Bridge to Nowhere? Okay, what is the Bridge to Nowhere? It's the same bridge. It is the same bridge. But look where the river's at, and look where the river's at, and look where the bridge is at, and look where the bridge is at. We just all endured, in our generation, doesn't matter what age you are, this is the generation that endured the pandemic. All chaos rained down on us. The forces beyond our control impacted our lives, impacted it radically. And there was nothing that we can do. We have built structures and systems and processes, but we were not prepared for the forces beyond our control. So what force am I talking about here, if not 2005 Hurricane Mitch? A force so powerful and so strong that it actually shifted the river. The bridge stood solid, it was there, but it shifted the river and the roads and washed away the roads. The river relocated, right? All around us, things are relocating that we have no control over, but how do we come back and gain that control? And we're going to talk about that. But I want you to think about, where will your bridge lead you and others? Have you heard about the Great Manure Crisis of 1894? It's okay. So I used to think that these little brown pellets were chocolate ice cream. And I would send emojis of the round emoji with the tongue sticking out, with the ice cream to my husband. And I always wondered why he never came home with chocolate ice cream, but he would always send me a heart emoji or the smirky face emoji where it's like, right, questionable, because I'm lactose intolerant. So he was thinking, yeah, thanks for sharing that with me, sweetheart. Now I realize what it is. And if you don't know what it is, ask your neighbor to tell you a story. The Great Manure Crisis of 1894 in New York and around parts of the world, the metropolis parts around the world. So innovation was about to be sprung. I'm talking about automobile. Here is a feature in the Times of London in the late 1800s. In 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure. Something has to crack. Okay, forget I said crack. Something has to change, right? Because people were going to be in manure hell. So this is the beginning of transformational change. Transformational change requires us to radically shift our thinking in ways that are unconventional. So you may be practicing traditional models of practices as historians, as museum practitioners, but times have changed. Those business models that have once served you, your organization, and your board no longer can serve you in today's time, no longer will serve you in the future. Because why? Because change is all around us. Change is all around us. People now, this is one of the most powerful devices we'll ever own. And today's generation is accessing this for every information. They don't want printout, they don't want flyers. And here's a quote from Einstein. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used to when we created them. So true, right? Times have changed, should inform how we do business, how we practice, and how we do history. And I've just talked about this, right? Traditional strategy starts from within. When we do strategy, we think about the SWOT analysis, right? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats? It is an internal, strategic way of understanding how do we pool together our talents, our resources, and go forward. But rarely do leadership look at what's outside. Okay? So if you're not scanning the horizon, if you're not scanning externally what's happening around you, you're going to ignore the signals that is saying, hey, you got to change in 2 years, otherwise you're going to have another pandemic. Otherwise, something catastrophic is going to happen. So you have to balance internal strategy with external strategy, and that's called strategic foresight. So I have a doctorate in strategic leadership, and I'm going to be kicking off a new PhD level course at Boise State next spring, and I'm going to be teaching all of this to my students because it is important as leaders that we have to shift our way of thinking and our way of doing, and we have to help coach and mentor our followers, our team members, the way. This is a castle, so that's my mom, my niece, and I. This is Hohenzollern, if I'm pronouncing that right, Hohenzollern Castle in Germany. It's a beautiful castle, well kept. The Baron and his family still lives there, and they've opened up parts of the castle for tourism because there's no funding that can help repair the castle, even as a baron, because they work normal jobs like you and I. So they had to radically think differently in creating it not only as a museum, but also a tourist attraction, shifting and transforming their way of thinking and their way of doing history. So where are you today? Take a good look at this picture. We're in the middle. The past is the foremost picture of older buildings, and the background is the future, and we're in the middle somewhere. Where are you? Are you still in the past, or have you already launched and trajected yourself into the future? Now is the time for us to shift our way of thinking and doing. So this is me with a blonde wig on, and I'm canopying over New York City and looking over the horizon. We have to do that. We have to step so many thousands of feet away, step outside our traditional boundaries, and identify where there are trends, what is happening around us in the environment. We have to understand what are the root causes that's driving those environmental changes. And then we have to create a scenario. If we were to do A, what would that result in? But if we were to do B, would that yield the same result? What about C? We have to create these scenarios and walk them through to be informed as leaders, as practitioners in history. And I'll share my slides with all of you, and this is quite a busy slide, and I won't spend a lot of time with it. The driving forces, so scanning, so this is called the Strategic Foresight Tool, and STEEPLE is the acronym of all of these elements, so social, socio-cultural, technical, economic, environment, political, legal, and ethical. And there are components in each that we have to think about. So as historians, if we were to say, what are the socio-cultural implications to how we are doing history? How is that serving us? Is it helping us to advance our vision, our goals, our mission, or is it not? What are the generational shifts in attitudes? There's a lot of talk about churches dying off, established old churches dying off because no one is coming to church but the older folks, right? Nobody is coming. Why is that? Because people are not accessing online churches and other reasons as well. So we have to think through that and walk through that. As leaders, we are often monitored, unbeknownst to us. We're often viewed silently by our followers, whether they are our children, our students, our staff members, our colleagues. We are being watched, and what we do can be pivotal to where and how we lead. These are the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. So, are you operating with solely head? You're so tactical and so strategic that you're ignoring the signs of what needs to be healed in your sphere of influence? Or are you only operating with heart and no head, where you're so emotionally connected that you're not able to think and strategize to pull your organization and your team forward? So the 5 practices include modeling the way. Instead of telling people what to do, show them. Show them how you lead. Inspire a shared vision. Is your vision aligned to your organization? How do you inspire your team members, your communities, to align with your vision? How do you show them, if not through storytelling? You're going to challenge the process, challenge the status quo. So if this isn't working, can we try something different, something radically different, something transformational? Enabling others to act. Empowerment is key. Empowering others to act. Get to failure fast. I'm also a quality improvement practitioner, and so I always tell my team members, let's fail real fast so we know that it's not going to work, and then we'll try something different. It's not meant to be punitive, but encourage, enable, and empower others to act, to lead. And then encouraging the heart, right? That is so powerful. There needs to be a balance of head and heart. Another quote here, Aristotle, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. So true. Am I good on time, Richard? Okay, thank you. So I'm very proud of the slide because I dreamt it up and I created it myself, and I think it's a beautiful slide, and it's one of my favorite colors. So, emotional intelligence, what is it? We'll talk about that. So why emotional intelligence matters. In today's industries, across all industry sectors, hiring managers are no longer just looking for talents and skills, but they want to know, can you work with people? Can you adjust your emotions and your attitudes, right? Can you pick up the cues to be able to work and get along with people? So, recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions is so important. When we are able to manage our own emotions, remember the temp exercise I walked you through, our thoughts, our energy, our emotions, our mood, and our perspectives. When we recognize our own emotions of how, where we're at today, right now, impacts others, gosh, we could do so many wonderful things. Here's how it would benefit you. Emotional intelligence can decrease the level of occupational stress. It can actually elevate your sense of enjoyment in your work. It can help to improve decision making. And you keep your emotions at bay. Reducing staff turnover is huge. It's okay, take 5 minutes and speak with your staff instead of just go right into strategy or right into business. Increases personal well-being. Something magical happens when you're connecting with people. Psychologically, something magical happens. It increases leadership ability and agility, and also it increases team performance. All of these are so critical. So now let's talk about cultural intelligence. So that beautiful lady at the front there is me, yours truly. And I'm there at the Lao Embassy to the United States in Washington, D.C. And I found this picture, and I was laughing thinking about it because although I speak Lao, Southern Lao, and these are all Northern folks, I also speak high school level Lao. So I'm not well versed in the professional or political language. And I was called out by the Lao ambassador to the United States just to be recognized. And there was a sea of people behind me, all men for the most part. And I came out and they were taking pictures and I just stood there. And another man came up and they took pictures and I stood there. And then a third man came up and I stood there. And finally the Lao ambassador says in English, "Palina, you can get off the stage now." Right? He had said it in Lao multiple times, but I didn't pick up the cue. And he recognized my culture, although I'm Lao, is different than his. I'm of a younger generation, raised in the US, and he was able to adjust and shared it in English. So here, the capability to function effectively across various cultural contexts, national, ethnic, organizational, generational, and et cetera, right? So important that we exercise and elevate our levels of emotional and cultural intelligence. I won't read through this. I'll have you stare at it, and again, my slides will be provided. This is important, right? And here's another tool, and I know I only have like 1 more minute left. And I leave you with this quote. "You want to be the pebble in the pond that creates the ripples for change," Tim Cook, an author. And then all of this stuff I will table. This would be great for workshop opportunities. These are basically change management tools and tactics. And I'm happy to come back and do a workshop at some point. The assumption that change has to start at the top is wrong. Start where you are. All right, back to the Flintstones. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we've got a time for a few questions, a couple of questions, and so I think we have a few staff members who are walking around who have mics. We've got John Marks on one side, and we've got my man Scott here on the side. So if you just raise your hand, they can bring a mic to you. Scott.
Good morning, and thank you for speaking to us today. I want to go back to the topic of emotional intelligence and talking about how important it is to pick up those cues from other individuals. How does that method of thinking include our neurodivergent neighbors and colleagues when they're having these thoughts of, not necessarily being able to connect in that same way? How are we able to support our colleagues in those positions? Emotional intelligence may not come as easily to them.
I am so sorry. I did not. Okay, so. Yeah.
The question is about emotional intelligence and how we can support our colleagues who are neurodivergent and, don't take to that as easily.
Right. So it's about how we can support our colleagues who may be neurodivergent, like autistic, ADHD.
Yeah. That's a very powerful question. I have not had that experience, but I do have some team members who I have to shift my way of thinking to adapt to their way of learning. And that is applying our cultural intelligence as well as recognizing that they don't live or speak the way that we do or react to things the way that we do. So as I'm hearing them speaking, I'll actually reframe it in a way to get their consensus, to make sure that they realize I understand before I proceed. And that is really elevating our emotional intelligence. I have a team member who is, I don't know, obviously you don't ask these questions, but he has a hard time and he's well educated, but I have to repeat myself 3 times. And it was me sitting down with him and asking him, I don't know how best to serve you as your leader. What would you like me to do differently, right? Do we need to spend more one-to-one time, because I spend 30 minutes with all my staff members, or is it 1 hour? And we actually spend time, we do 2 in-person meetings, and we spend 30 minutes just talking about anything and everything unrelated to work. to get to know each other. And for me, it's helping me to understand his world. And then the second 30 minutes is we really talk about work. And I'll pull in examples from the first 30 minutes of the stories to bake in. And I do a lot of storytelling. So when I'm asking you to work with the bureau chiefs, what I would like you to do is think about a time when you blah, 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 right? And that tends to work well for him. It's just taking that extra time, and that is applying our heart. Great question, thank you.
Hold it nice and close.
How you doing, man? My name is Jerome Loach from Eastern State Prison Historical Site. I would like to ask you, what was some of the challenges you faced in telling your lived experience, okay? And how do you think you can assist or share that so that others here can be able to share their own personal lived experience?
I heard about my challenges.
Challenges in sharing your personal story and how you might suggest how we do that.
Yeah, gosh, thank you for asking that. As you can tell, I was a bit emotional at times when I was sharing my story. Now, I've done this for years, but it doesn't always prepare you. I always get emotional, but you know, when I share my story, I'm very protective now of when, how, and to whom I share my story with, because I've had it come back and have had some heartaches in sharing my story, and it did not resonate well with the audience. Not that they were in the wrong, but you know, then they're on their phone, or then they're laughing at another joke unrelated to yours, and it really impacts you as a storyteller negatively. So when you go to tell your story, and I knew this audience well enough to know that I can be safe in sharing my story, but you know, you give a little disclaimer in that this is a very personal and private story, and I share it cautiously, and I want to make sure that we have the time, right? I'll get emotional, or you know, and you kind of build that relationship up to it, and you make that decision to share your story. I no longer share my story with high school students, and although they were very respectful, they don't relate. And as a storyteller, the one who lived through that, it hurts, right? And again, they've done nothing wrong, but it's just I'm very protective of how I share my story.